Hello and welcome everybody to the Dead Space wrap-up. I'm Rat Dragon,
And I'm Little Dansky.
and this is our big wrap-up of Dead Space.
Yeah, I think we should start out with our general impressions of the game.
I love it.
Yeah,
It's a fantastic game.
Yeah, it's literally one of my favorite series. Like, all three of the games are my favorite. And yeah, I mean, it's a great game. It's hard to find something bad to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who remember our Metro wrap-up, we
had a lot to say.
were very negative people, and even we kind of had to scrape the barrel a little bit to find things to criticize.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the game, we did kind of rag on it a little bit, but that's what we do.
Yeah, we're bad people.
Yeah. Well, let's start with a level design to start, like the Ishimura itself.
There's actually a quote from, I believe it's Kotaku, the gaming website, that I think really kind of encapsulates the whole feel of the game, is that the Ishimura is the best magic trick in gaming, period.
Mm-hmm. Well, you care to elaborate that?
The reason they said this, and I wholeheartedly agree with them, is that it gives this illusion of being on this massive mining vessel, when actually the game itself is fairly small. One thing that not a lot of people know about Dead Space is Dead Space actually loads each room individually.
I didn't actually know that until recently.
Yeah, it's why the doors never open particularly quickly, and sometimes they take a little longer than others. It's the game is actually building the room behind them, and as you exit your room, it shuts the door and deletes it.
Yeah. The environmental puzzles were okay. They weren't stupidly esoteric.
Yeah, I mean, there's no Resident Evil, go find the blue chalice and the red fire key to open the gas station bathroom. Bullshit.
Yeah, it all makes sense. And I mean, like, the puzzles, like the tram was broken, so you couldn't do that, so you had to fix it in order to do that. It made it seem like you had to do it.
There were a couple things that seemed weird. Like when we pointed out a lot those stupid switches where you have to use the kinesis module instead of just reaching up and grabbing the lever and pulling it down.
Yeah, I honestly think that was more just to kind of use the function that they had.
Yeah, I could see that.
But it was still kind of silly.
A little goofy.
Yeah, and talking about silly, I mean, the fact that the Ishimura is retardedly dangerous.
Yeah, and like Dansky and I are not engineers. But even we're walking through it and kind of looking at it this with an engineer's eye going, there's better ways to make this ship. And, it's not even the parts where, like, the ship's clearly malfunctioning.
Yeah.
Like that place where there's all the fire spewing out later in the game.
Yeah, and you got the little electric wires spraying around.
There's just things where it's like, okay, why? You're on a mining ship, trillions and trillions of miles away from the nearest point of resupply, and
medical facilities.
you make this ship extremely stupidly.
Yeah, like trying to get to an ADS system while crawling over the top of the ship as asteroids are pelting it.
Yeah, it's a glaring flaw there.
Well, and from there we can kind of go on to enemy design.
Actually, the enemy design was pretty freaking fantastic in this game.
Yeah.
With one exception, which we will get to later.
Yeah. I find the best part is throughout all the enemies, you had different things. They work differently, but you always were capable of using the developed strategies that you went through the entire game with to proceed.
Yeah, the big thing is that the big strategy in the game is dismemberment. Was the big selling point when Dead Space was launched. Mm-hmm. They talk about it in the game, they talk about it in the anime, which we'll touch on later.
Yeah.
And you always can use dismemberment to help and to allow you to save ammo as you progress forward. It's just that the enemies themselves are each slightly different. I mean, like, you've got the basic slashy guys, the slashers.
Yeah, it's the basic necromorphs. You got your babbies.
Yeah, the lurkers, as they're actually called on the wiki, as it turns out.
Oh.
I like babbies better myself.
Yeah.
And you do dismember, your goal is to dismember these enemies to kill them faster, but they're done in different ways. I mean, the lurkers, you shoot the limbs off of the slashers you shoot the limbs off of, and the lurkers, the babbies.
You got the tentacles.
Yeah, you shoot those out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, same basic strategy, different execution.
Yeah, which leads to one thing that speaking of execution, that we didn't really get to employ too much, because, I mean, we lost a lot of footage at one point, so we just kind of went, fuck it, and tried to push through the game as much as possible.
Yeah, 3 hours of footage.
and the entire save was
Yeah,
gone.
so we had about a 6-hour setback and probably an 8-hour game.
Yeah.
So,
Which, I mean, it's the one thing we didn't do is the brutal death scenes. I mean, we saw it in some of the bosses where, the last boss just kind of ate the fuck out of us.
yeah, I mean, some of those were just metal as shit.
Mhm.
Yeah, like you were discussing those enemies that break off into the little.
Well, it's every enemy has. It's like a percentage chance if it kills you, then it actually triggers the animation. But it's they all have a unique death. Like the little head wobbly tentacle things, they actually if it ends up killing you, it actually pulls off your head and sticks itself inside your neck and makes you walk around like a zombie, which is hysterical.
Yeah, or the lurkers like they grab you by the neck and use their center tentacle to punch out your visor.
Yeah, like that. The basic necromorphs cut off your arms, do an execution pose, and chop off your head.
Yeah. They do. There's a lot of different death scenes, and again, we do apologize. We had a lot more in that giant segment of footage we lost.
Yeah. You got to see him, or you missed out seeing him fail in those one enemies that drag you around.
Yeah, although admittedly that one's just kind of you see Isaac clawing at the edge of the tentacle thing, then gets kind of shooped.
And gets out. And
then gets pulled
in
back
by his face.
Yeah. which was pretty funny, but again,
Well, how do you feel about the bosses?
The bosses overall were actually pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they were kind of samey, but I mean, it's kind of, they used a slightly different mechanic than the other enemies.
Yeah, I mean the bosses, shoot the weak point for massive damage to go back to the meme, which again, the fact that they were all kind of the same, shoot the big yellow pustule thing, that's kind of lame. But I would take that way over just having to dump thousands and thousands of rounds into them.
Yeah.
Cough, cough, Destiny, cough. And so it's they all kind of played out in similar manners, but
they were really cool enemies.
Yes.
Off the top of my head, there were 3 official bosses, and I mean, they were unique. They were fun. I mean, they looked absolutely dangerous. The final boss being the biggest example of just okay, that's really bad.
Yeah, no. I don't know if it came across in the recording, but there's a line where a point where we're about to fight the final boss, well, I'm off to go kill a god. And it feels like you're fighting a god. And that is entirely appropriate for a final boss. That is totally how a final boss should go in my book.
Yeah, and on that high note, let's go on to the low. Let's talk about the Regenerator.
I hate that thing.
I hate that thing so much too. It's in fact my least favorite part of the game.
So we kind of are going to spend a lot of time picking this stupid thing apart. Because we spent a lot of time in the game shooting it apart.
Let's start one. It was invented by a psychologist. I didn't know he knew how to do that.
Yeah, well, you can kind of counter that one. It was the marker talking to him. The marker is giving him these crazy psychic instructions. It says, "Hey, it's a good idea." One of my big things about regenerating enemies is I come from a bit of a scientific background, and when there's a thing called the law of conservation of matter can neither be created or destroyed, asterisks.
Yeah.
So the thing is that if you shoot the regenerator's limbs off, it spawns new ones, and it's got this crazy little squicky animation where it goes
and dust clouds and stuff are popping out.
Yeah. The problem is that to generate a limb of the same mass as the last one, you'd have to pull that amount of mass from the core of the beast. So you could literally take it out by just simply shooting all 4 of its limbs off, waiting for it to spawn back, shooting out the now weakened limbs, and just basically keep doing it until you're being attacked by a noodle. And then you could pick it up, put it in your pocket, and throw it at people.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the weakest part. I mean, it's scientifically,
bullshit.
Yeah, complete bullshit.
Yeah, now if they showed it feeding or grappling onto that weird fleshy stuff that infests the Ishimura.
Yeah, and if it regenerated doing that would have made far more sense.
Yeah, that would have been cooler.
Yeah.
And
And, I mean, we can kind of go on to regenerating enemies as a whole. I mean, the entire factor that, I mean, it's just a poor enemy. It looks like the basic Necromorph, just slightly bigger.
Hmm.
It acts the same. You walk around, you have to shoot it. And it's the point, you're just trying to get away from it. And so many times you're like, oh, wait, you can't leave this room until you kill everything else while this thing's pursuing you. It's just like, come on. Just let me get through this damn segment.
It's just a tired trope at this
Mhm.
point. And even when Dead Space was made, I mean,
It was tired then.
yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of regenerating enemies that popped up before this. You had both Tyrant and Nemesis from the Resident Evil
Yeah,
series.
you had a Run Like Hell, the one game we briefly mentioned.
Yeah, totally.
PS2 exclusive.
Yeah, totally a worthwhile game to play. And if we ever get a chance to actually show it to you guys, you will see why we make a lot of comparisons between Run Like Hell and Dead Space.
Yeah.
We just have a lot of technical problems to overcome first.
Yeah, I don't know how to do a PS2 emulator.
Yeah. And time and inclination and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just the regenerator is definitely the low point in the game. It's
Mhm.
just it's this tired old gaming trope chasing you around until you get to the set piece that allows you to disable it.
Mhm.
And while vaporizing it in the thrusters of the shuttle was satisfying, it's only because I knew it wasn't coming back.
Yeah. Then it's like, look, cool, I finally incinerated it to the point where it can't actually regenerate.
And there's about goddamn time.
Yeah. Well, from there, let's go on to weapon design. I mean, I like it.
Yeah, I really like the kind of jury-rigged feel a lot of the weapons have.
Mhm.
Again, we do have to apologize. We wanted to show off the weapons a lot more. I mean, they are all actually fairly cool.
They're all unique, too. I mean, they have their own little pros, cons. They, have their primary fire, which is really cool, and they all have secondary fire, which the basic gun doesn't really have, besides rotating its little
Yeah,
axis.
but the issue we ran into is, again, we lost so much footage. We're kind of running against a tight deadline between this game and the next game that we're doing.
That we beat the deadline by a lot.
Yeah, by like 3 weeks. So we didn't want to, have to spend more time gathering more money and resources to just make more of the weapons happen, which is kind of sad. But
Yeah.
we'll try and get some footage and play it over this, so you can see some of the other weapons and also some of the end game items we got from beating the game.
Yeah, and also we could talk about the weapon design. How about the stores where they come from? I find it absolutely hysterical that they force us to, like, hey, we found this blueprint that somebody made. Let's pop it in the store. Oh, it's going to charge me an arm and a leg to get it.
Yeah, here's your 10,000 credits for a potentially life-saving device. It's always kind of a weird trope you run into in sci-fi games. I mean, like the game, the feature itself makes sense, just because you want to have a way to replenish the players if they've already picked the level clean without, bukakeing the level with health power-ups and
I could pick a better adjective than that, but yes.
yeah, but it just seems kind of weird. Like, why isn't there some like emergency setting where it's like, hey, we're having a crazy emergency thing. Let's push this button on the bridge that makes all the items in the stores free.
Yeah. And it's just like, and it raises the question, like, how the hell does, like, external space commerce work? What do you balance the cost on?
Yeah, and there's sort of the thing. It's like, wow, my small little med kit here is worth like what, 2,000 credits? I mean, are they dealing in yen or like Turkish lira?
I mean, beyond what you may not know, money is retardedly complicated.
Yeah.
Like, just as a whole. I mean, you have your amount and you spend it, but there's so much that goes on to how much it's worth.
So yeah, it's just kind of, the existence of the stores raises some of these questions.
Yeah.
And Dead Space kind of pushes them off to the side and goes, look at the glorpy monsters.
Who wait for you until you get out of the store.
Yeah. There's some games that have done it better than others. One game we will definitely be touching on at some point is System Shock 2.
Yeah.
And System Shock, and 2 by extension, use nanites. And the way they explain it is that you're using the nanites to make the item. So you're not actually spending money, you're giving the machine nanites so it will make your pistol, ammunition, health kit, whatever.
Yeah.
Which, again, makes a little more sense than how the Ishimura did it.
Yeah. Well, from the store, let's lead on to the UI as a whole. Just what thoughts, how did it feel?
Absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Once once you get into Dead Space as a game, you get into the little player space. Everything is presented inside that player space. Isaac's health is shown on his rig on the back. His all of the inventory menus are projected by that little thing on his chest. It's kind of like right around his collarbone. It projects like
where you
up
can't really see it. But
yeah. Well, it works like an old arcade machine. It projects it up onto his visor.
Yeah.
It really kind of pulls you in. Even the weapons all have little holographic displays that show
right
their ammo.
in front of them. All the buttons, instead of saying, "Hey, push A at this point," it's like, "Hey, here's the activation holo screen."
Yeah, and it works really damn well. It pulls you into the game. It keeps you immersed, and it really kind of helps you focus your senses because you're not looking outside of the game as it were to check your health or your ammo. It's all right there.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And of course, there is the downside where it's the game is kind of just a direct port from consoles to computer, or the game works 1,000 times better with the controller.
Yeah,
like mouse and keyboard, not ideal.
Yeah, we were initially intending to play this with a controller just because that's what the game's designed for. But for some weird asinine reason, on the PC we were using, we could not get the controller drivers to work properly.
Yeah.
We're still working on
the future.
But it was a weird problem.
Yeah. Well, and from there, let's go on to character development.
Well, let's start with everybody's favorite target of hatred, Hammond.
Hammond. I like Hammond. He was a cool character.
Oh yeah, I actually kind of liked Hammond. He was definitely very more like the captain-y guy than anything else. It
would help he is the captain.
Yeah. And I would consider him probably the least developed, but again, he has some fairly serious competition from some of the other characters.
Yeah.
At the very least, you have to respect him because he's kind of a hard motherfucker.
Throughout the entire time, Kendra's just kind of like, "You! Fuck you!"
Yeah, he was actually a fairly well done character. I liked him.
Yeah.
Speaking of Kendra, as much as we actually ragged on Kendra,
she's probably the most reasonable character in the game. Sans the spy thing.
Yeah, it's just like up until that spy point, it's like okay, I'm freaking out because I'm trapped in a life or death situation that I cannot possibly comprehend. And yeah,
let's find a figure of authority and yell at him.
Yeah, that's what I'd do.
Yep.
But
yeah,
then there's sort of we also have to address the spy thing. Like,
they
did an okay job leading up to it.
They did drop hints throughout the whole game.
It's just it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Yeah, it hurt the game a little bit. Is that so? The entire plot of the later half of the game is you discover that the Ishimura is not supposed to be at Aegis 7.
Was sent by the church.
Yeah, was sent by the Unitology Church to pull the marker out and do churchy things.
Yeah, it's explained in the other two games.
Yeah. So Kendra tries to steal the marker for the Earth government.
Who put it there in the first place.
Because it was a safe spot and for the experiment. So why? Like, why was she trying to remove this highly dangerous piece of, stuff? I guess technology.
Yeah, it's just the marker. Just call it that.
And transport it away from the planet where it was safe.
Yeah. I mean, it would make a lot more sense if she actually wandered around and actively tried to sabotage you, make sure that thing did not leave. Yeah,
like you discover that all of everything she's doing, trying to cut off Hammond is part of a sabotage thing. And she's like, you all right there?
Oh yeah, it's coughing. Sorry,
Yeah.
We're still sick.
Yeah, and also, or like the Gru guy from Red October, if any of you have ever seen that.
Yeah.
He's this fanatically mission dedicated guy whose job is to make sure that what's happening on the Red October doesn't spread.
Yeah.
A little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen Red October.
I'll watch it. It's a superior movie to most others.
Even with Sean Connery's absolutely awful Russian accent.
Oh, come on. It's Scottish, but Russian.
Scrushin. But yeah, if it made sense, she's, this crazy Earth government agent who's I have to sabotage this mission so that there's no chance of the marker getting out, and I'm willing to give up my life for it.
Yeah, being the internal antagonist.
Yeah. Or better yet, she works for the church, and she's trying to steal the marker out from the noses of everyone else.
Yeah.
Just to absolutely guarantee it goes to the church. But it doesn't.
Yeah.
She's just this weird, nebulous spy character who is just kind of antagonized into there.
Well, since we're at the note for antagonizing, let's talk about Dr. Mercer. The grand psychologist.
Yeah, not too bad of a character. I mean, as a character, he's not terribly well developed beyond being a crazy religious fanatic.
Yeah, they kind of put points in it where it kind of explains what he's doing. It's like, okay, he's actually, he's a highly fanatical dude. He's trying to it says this. This is good for us. Just let us die.
Yeah, although the thing that gets me is that Mercer is supposed to have an accent that's a little kind of a less stereotypical Middle Eastern accent.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like an accent so much as it sounds like a speech impediment. I mean, it's good he doesn't sound like freaking Apu, but again, it needed a little work, and that's just a problem you run into.
Yeah, I mean, on the bright side, he died at the end, so.
Yeah. And the other question that we had about is, how exactly does Mercer get around the ship?
Yeah, I mean, he wanders around. I mean, there's these dangerous things that, absolutely kill without warning.
Yeah,
they have their entire thing is kill and spread their own disease thing, make more necromorphs. And here he is, just kind of like, I'm just going to wander around.
Yeah, and the big fan theory is that the hive mind will protect individuals it finds valuable to its purposes.
Which, in the second game, that's actually it's proven wrong.
Yeah. Or, it was using Mercer to kind of spread its gospel among humans, but again, it's hard to say.
Exactly. And, well, let's say go to Dr. Kine, the other crazy man.
Kine actually is kind of in the same boat as Mercer. He mainly exists to be crazy.
Yeah.
Never, ever have him vaccinate anybody, ever.
Yeah, it's sedatives are not supposed to go through the ocular cavity. Yeah. It's better to go into a vein where it goes to your heart and spreads to the rest of your body.
Yeah. That's the one thing that you pointed out after we finished recording, is that, why does Isaac follow Kine?
Yeah. And why is everybody so willing to throughout the audio logs, which I will bring up a point to those in a moment. Mm-hmm. But audio logs that you read about him, everything you hear about him, everything you read about him, he has obviously lost his mind and is freaking out, threatening people and whatnot to get this marker somewhere else. Why? Why do you follow this guy? Why is everybody on board? It's like, hey, he randomly pops up. Let's do what he says.
Yeah, even Kendra, Mrs. Dowdy Pants herself, who doesn't trust this person that she's been working with for years. Mm-hmm. It's still like, you know what, Isaac? Go forth. Go with God. Follow the crazy man.
Yeah. Let's give him the one shuttle that he admitted to sabotaging.
Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch of characters that we'd never honestly met, but they did turn out pretty good. Like the engineer Temple. We got the botanist Cross.
Yeah, Temple and Cross,
which we just got recently.
Yeah. Some days even brick-like subtlety is not enough for us.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the whole thing, throughout the audio logs, it did develop their characters relatively well. I mean, you did kind of get attached to them.
Yeah, I liked Temple, even though I only saw him getting a railroad spike through the forehead.
I did not realize that the guy that that Mercer actually stabbed in the head was Temple. I mean, maybe they brought that up in the wiki.
I could have sworn I heard him address the guy as Temple. I'd have to go back and look at the footage.
Okay, yeah, I'll double check it myself as well. And I guess that leads to the one character that we've been dancing around, Isaac. The silent protagonist.
And we made our feelings on silent protagonists clear back in Metro 2033. But the one thing we do have to bring up, he's better than a lot of the other ones, purely because Isaac is more of a silent film star and less of a vehicle for the player.
Mm-hmm. He does actually betray a lot of emotion, whatnot, just simply by, pantomime and whatnot. His body language does speak for him.
Yeah, I mean, like when you're walking across that organic matter,
Hmm.
it's obvious it's like sticking and it's kind of grossing
And he
him
just
out.
doesn't like that.
Or when he finds out Nicole died, you can actually see him, put his hand up to his visor and go, "Oh my god!" This kind of like "Oh my god" expression.
Yeah.
I'm losing my goddamn mind.
Hmm.
My lover is dead. And it's also cool that at the very end of the game you do get to see his face.
Yeah, I did like that too. It actually put a face to the character that you're playing as.
Yeah, you spent all this time building this attachment to Isaac, and your reward for beating the game is seeing Isaac.
Hmm. And one thing, even though I said to skip over to Isaac, I honestly forgot. Let's talk about Nicole, the entire mission for Isaac.
Actually, that's not necessarily so bad. Is Nicole's kind of Isaac in a way.
Hmm.
She's
Kind of
this,
his emotion.
yeah, his weird psychic projection of his girlfriend. And I don't know how many people kind of caught a lot of the hints that the game drops about Nicole's status throughout the entire game.
Hmm. Like every time she brought up, make us whole again. That's like the cue for just like, hey, I am part of the hive mind or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Or sharp-eyed viewers might have caught this if you were paying attention. If you take all of the chapter titles
Hmm.
and the first letter of them actually spells out, so you've got new arrivals, first letters N.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember any of them.
But it does spell out Nicole is dead.
Yes.
And, I mean, that's the biggest hint there.
Yeah.
You have to play through the whole game in order to get that, I suppose. But
Yeah, and they also do some weird things, too, with like how she moves around.
yeah, whenever you're in the same room as her, the computers are freaking out.
Yeah, or when you're moving from the shuttle, when you see her in the flight control room, you get in the shuttle, and then she gets in behind you.
Hmm.
And, they kind of do this thing where they try to make it look like they were trying to imply that time had passed, and Isaac had spent time doing stuff, but it was kind of clumsy.
Yeah.
But they kind of used what looks like them being bad developers as a way to imply that,
It give you the question. Is like, is she real? Is she not?
Yeah.
Kind of make you have to look back on it.
Yeah, and I think, it's really, really well done, for a figment of the imagination.
Yeah, and I did like that. Well, let's go on to the actual full wrap-up of the wrap-up. Would you recommend Dead Space?
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Yes. I mean, it is an excellent game. Again, my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, the game itself is this beautifully atmospheric action horror game. I mean, even though Dansky and I are very cynical people, we're very sarcastic people.
Yeah,
Still very sick people.
Yeah. Well, no, it's like through the sarcasm, it is used as a vessel to kind of like bring up points of interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was even points where we had to like stop and just be like, we can't joke about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
There's a few points where it's just like, wow, that's way too dark for us to make any kind of jokes about.
Without feeling like terrible, terrible people.
Yeah, and we are. It's just we have limits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, would you say it has good replayability?
It has okay replayability.
Yeah.
The game, when you replay the game, you're basically you're playing the game again. It's not like you're exploring new content, new worlds have opened up.
I mean, they give you new stuff and more cash and whatnot to mess around with.
Yeah,
but
you get a military suit, which hopefully I'll have footage of this overlaying this audio. And get that. You get the some new cash, but it's really kind of the same gameplay experience.
I mean, that being said, I've sat through the whole game 6 times now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the best way to play it, I think, is like you play it, you get through it, you love it, right? And you uninstall it, wait like maybe a year or two, and pick it up again, and then play it as a new experience. You'll find new things. You'll just enjoy the experience once again.
Yeah, and at $20 on Steam right now, $34 for the full
$34.99 for the package.
Dead Space 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, Dead Space 3 you're gonna have to go on Origins for, but
yeah, there's reasons to go on Origin.
Yeah.
All right, but
yeah, we absolutely recommend, especially if you're going into game design. I mean, this would be a good, like, you can see good examples of game design in this
everything.
Game. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Like, yeah, we had very hard time finding things wrong with it.
All right, well, I think that about wraps things up.
Yeah.
I'm Rat Dragon.
I'm Little Dansky.
And that is the end of Dead Space.
Dead Space.